Hi there, in this video segment we're going to illustrate, now that you have your question banks built, how you can go ahead and build your assessment and pull in questions from your question banks into that particular assessment. So we're going to go into Schoology. Again, remember, under Resources, you'll choose Assessment. You'll find your assessment team over here on the left and go into your subject folder. In this example, we're going to go to a sandbox area just for demonstration purposes, and I'm going to open up my chemistry folder. And then, just like in your regular assessment teams, you'll have your subject folder for question banks. And if you remember from the previous segment, within that question bank folder, you have your question banks, and then within the question banks, you have the individual questions. Before you can begin to add questions to an assessment, you need to make sure that each question in the question bank is set to active. However, if you don't do that, those questions won't be available for you to choose to bring into the assessment. And so, by default, they're going to be set to draft. You want to make sure that you check the active option. So let's go ahead and step through the process of making that assessment. So in order to do that, go back to your main level folder. In this case, I'm using chemistry, but it could be physics or world history, whatever it is. And just outside of the question bank folder, you'll go up here to add resources, and you're going to add an assessment. Just like in Schoology, you could add the test quiz. This is adding an assessment using the AMP platform. So we're going to click Add Assessment, and then you'll give it a name. So whatever name that you want to use here, I'm just going to call this Chem Assessment. And then if there's any special directions that you want to put in here, you can type that in there. And then underneath here, you're going to choose what question banks you want to use to bring questions into this particular assessment. So I'm going to click the plus sign, and it's going to ask me, for the first time I do this, what question banks do I want to use? So when I select that, I'm going to find those question banks that I used to build earlier. And so here's just an example of them. If you know you're going to be pulling in questions from multiple question banks, you can select multiple question banks at one time and then click Confirm. That will make all those questions within that those question banks available for you to choose from. So right now I'm going to go back to that question bank drop-down menu, and now you'll notice because I've associated those question banks, they're listed here, and then I can select questions from these question banks based off the standards. So if I know I need a question about chemistry properties using 9.11, I think I just made those numbers up, but I can choose the S for select, and I can take a look at all the questions that deal with that particular standard. And if there's a question or two that I want, I can check those two here, and I can scroll down and click Confirm. And now I've added those two questions to my assessment. If I want questions from another standard, again, I'll choose question banks. This time I'm going to go to a different standard. I'll click Select, and again, I will choose a question from that particular question bank and confirm. And so this is a process of going through and adding questions to your assessment from the individual question banks that are listed here. The S allows you to select them individually. If you choose the R, it's going to randomly assign questions. And so now that we're done, I've just added 3 questions here. You'll notice that this first question has 2 standards connected to it. And if you remember from the previous video segment, we aligned the standards when we made the questions initially in the question bank. So we're just going to go up to our main level here just to see what this looks like. So inside of chemistry, up here at the top, we have our question bank, and then underneath that we have our assessments, and you can build your assessments in this area right here. In our next video segment, we'll show you, now that this assessment is built, how you can send that assessment out to your team. Thank you and good luck.